Hello, my name's Gavin, and this is Genre Books, and this is the end of Rocket Summer, coming up to the end of Rocket Summer. I don't think I'm ready to let it go just yet. To that end, I've had an idea, possibly a stupid one, but I'll get onto that after some housekeeping. Rocket Summer is a reading event created for the month of July by Michael K. Vaughan and co-hosted by a panoply of booktuber glitterati who I will list below. In this event we are reading classic and vintage science fiction with 4 weekly prompts. The first week, science fiction up until the year 1939. Second week, 40 to 49. Third week, 50 to 59. Fourth week, 60 to 69. This is the 1960s this week. And I will be doing a roundup video of everything I've read in the month. But I've not finished just yet. We've still got a few days left. I will also be doing one final deep dive into what began as the pulps and by the 1960s are the science fiction digest magazines. For the 1960s, this has been the October 1963 issue of Galaxy magazine, and I have one story left to read in this, and hopefully the video on this appearing in the next day or so. I'm also a little over halfway through Why Call Them Back from Heaven by Clifford D. Simak, and I want to finish this and perhaps 2 more books by the end of the month before we turn our attentions to Garb August. I already loved science fiction, and I think Rocket Summer has just made me want to read more science fiction even more. Hearing about the books that the other co-hosts have read that I've not got round to yet, having a large TBR for the month which I knew I wasn't going to complete, I'm definitely going to sort of prioritise those as my next reads. But there's always more science fiction coming into the house, and I got a pile of tatty paperbacks for the princely sum of £3.20, which I'll show you now in a mini book haul interlude. Tattiest of the lot, and hopefully something which will survive at least one reading, is From Other Worlds, edited by August Deleth. There is number of stories in here. There's an Isaac Asimov story, there is a Donald Wandrei story. So Donald Wandrei is a famous science fiction pulp writer that I don't think I even managed to mention up until now during Rocket Summer. Well, there is also Jack Williamson, who was writing science fiction for absolute decades. There are 2 stories by John Wyndham here, one under his own name, and When the Walls Came Tumbling Down, and one from the 1940s under the name of John Benyon Harris, who is also John Wyndham, a story called Meteor. There's also The Metamorphosis of Earth by Clark Ashton Smith, one of the leading lights of Weird Tales, and this one in fact from Weird Tales from 1951. And a story by Kendall Foster Crossan, who fantastically is a writer new to me, but one that I will definitely be coming across later, because this story was from Planet Stories, and I will get to 1951 of Planet Stories at this rate probably in 3 or 4 years' time, as I continue my deep dive of issue by issue of that particular publication. Another writer who I didn't get round to reading for Rocket Summer, but who had a sort of very big impact early in the science fiction pulps, is Edmund Hamilton, and this is his book, Outside the Universe. So this was first serialized in the pulps in the 1920s, and this ace paperback came out in 1964. A book that I may get to in Garb August as part of looking at the Mushroom Press. So the Mushroom Press is the collective name given to a number of publishers in post-war Britain who sprung up in the late 40s, early 50s, producing ephemera in terms of literature. This is Barrier 345 from Badger Books, one of the imprints closely associated with the Mushroom Press. This is the John Spencer Company, I believe, and it is, well, it says it's written by Carl Siegfried. Carl Siegfried does not exist. This was a house name for Badger Books, and this is one of the many books that Lionel Fanthorpe wrote under many different names. I say wrote, I think by this point he was actually just dictating these novels to tapes because he was churning them out once a fortnight. Also, some paperbacks from the 1950s in the Cherry Tree book range, and including Murray Leinster and Ralph numbers and letters, I24C4I plus or 124C41 plus, I'm not sure yet. Written by Hugo Gernsback. Hugo Gernsback, obviously more famous as an editor of the pulps, and probably more famous for the Hugo Awards named in his honour. 1950s seems to be popular in this little pile, and this is Donald V. Swain's The Transposed Man. So this was originally from a 1950s pulp, then printed in the US by Ace Books, then over the Atlantic to be published as an early Panther imprint. And the final two books, maybe four books depending on your point of view, we have Bring Back Yesterday by A. Bertram Chandler and The Trouble with Tycho by Clifford D. Simak, and also Tramontane by Emile Partager, and The Wrecks of Time by Michael Moorcock. So the science fiction journey, I don't think will ever be ended. There's so much I want to read, but I think limiting it to classic and vintage science fiction at least has the benefit of making the available literary universe finite. Although you have Victorian literature, you have the pulp stories, you have the 1950s Cold War paranoia, you have the 1940s war influence, and you have the beginnings of that new wave. As I said in a recent video talking about the science fiction Superman, reading such a timescale of science fiction in such a small period of time that Rocket Summer has allowed us to do has made me crystallize some ideas of the themes that you can pigeonhole science fiction books and stories into. And I think what I'm going to want to do is examine those themes one by one for as long as it takes. These themes have their moment in science fiction. There are certain times where they are much more popular and prevalent in the popular writings, but they are all themes which I think have enough longevity that you can look at them through the prism of early works, pulp works, paperback works. So I've narrowed it down to 12, and if someone thinks of something else, please let me know, because I'm not fussy about the number of themes. But the first would be sort of utopia and dystopia, and that would incorporate post-apocalyptic, size change, sort of macrocosmos, microcosmos, supermen and psionic powers, invasions either by aliens or us invading somewhere else. If we're talking aliens, let's not just talk invasion, talk about good and bad alien encounters and incorporate monsters into that as well. Homegrown earth science, so genetic engineering, cloning, the whole idea of the mad professor, robots and artificial intelligence, time and time travel, space exploration and space opera, alternate universe, alternate history, and simulations. And lastly, the one I want to start with, which is lost worlds, lost societies, underground societies, Atlantis and Lemuria. And I'm starting with that theme because it's the one that's recently sort of grabbed me, or this year has, and the inflection point for that was reading The Coming Race by Edward Bulwer-Lytton. It wasn't so much the book, but it was reading about the impact that the book had, and it was reading about the impact and the wider context of that book that led me down, no pun intended, this rabbit hole. And it incorporates so much. You have the lost world of Arthur Conan Doyle, you have the journey to the centre of the earth from Jules Verne, you have the Lost Continent by C.J. Cutcliffe Hine. All of these are sort of Victorian or Edwardian examinations. The Secret City by Roy Norton. The Secret Power by Mary Corelli. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, perhaps. Going further back, the Isa Cameron from Casanova, or even Dante's Inferno. A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder by James DeMille. Lost Horizon by James Hilton. The Face in the Abyss by A. Merritt. The Writings on Atlantis from Ignatius Donnelly. The Writings on Lemuria from Richard Shaver. Edgar Rice Burroughs, obviously, gets involved. Tarzan and the Jewels of Opa, I think. The vast majority of these I have not read. Some I think are going to be fantastic. Some I think may be, a disappointment. But all of them I think are going to lend something to a grander thematic narrative, where I will start asking the question of what made it more popular at a certain point in time. I think with this first theme, the influence of theosophy is probably going to come into play. Mary Corelli wrote at least a book about theosophy. The Theosophists took another one of Edward Bulwer-Lytton's books as pretty foundational to the creation of theosophy. And I think with this we'll be able to see the influence that is still exercised by these ideas. The whole idea at the moment is pretty embryonic. I may get to the end of this first theme and decide that that's enough. But given past experience, I usually find that my appetite is only more whetted. I'm not going to do this to the exclusion of everything else that I like to do on BookTube, but I think that for the majority of BookTube events, I'll be able to shoehorn something in there. Basically, the idea will be to keep that little rocket summer warmth kindled throughout the autumn and the winter, and in the hope that there will be another rocket summer next year. Not that I'm quite finished with rocket summer this year yet. 2 more videos. One, the deep dive of the Galaxy magazine, and the last, once the month is over, just an overview of all that I did manage to read during the month. It's been fun, and I sincerely hope this isn't the end of it.